Politicians frequently claim they can settle decades-old wars and bring about global stability, resolving massive disputes with a single negotiation. If peace were that simple to achieve, new conflicts would not erupt year after year. Behind the campaign promises, a massive machine continues to grind, a system that depends on the very thing politicians claim they want to stop. This chart shows how the machine reacts to global instability. When war in Ukraine broke out, the general market, this red line, dropped 7%. But these green lines represent defense contractors like Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, which surged as the conflict escalated. To justify annual military spending that now nears $1 trillion, governments promote a specific narrative. They argue that maintaining peace requires a constant display of overwhelming strength. To understand why conflict persists, we must analyze war as a corporate business model, tracing its evolution back to the 1940s. Before the Second World War, the United States maintained a strictly isolationist stance. The public opposed involvement in foreign disputes, and the U.S. military ranked 19th in the world, smaller than the Army of Portugal. Rather than sending troops to stop Japanese expansion, the U.S. government used economic pressure. They froze Japanese bank accounts and cut off oil exports, attempting to halt the Japanese military by starving it of fuel. That economic strategy ended on December 7, 1941. The surprise strike on Pearl Harbor destroyed American isolationism instantly, pulling the nation into a global conflict it was not prepared to fight. The government needed millions of weapons immediately. However, private companies were hesitant. Converting civilian factories into munitions plants carried a massive financial risk. If the war ended early, those businesses would be stuck with empty factories and heavy debt. To overcome this hesitation, the U.S. government invented a financial incentive that removed the risk of weapon production for private corporations. This ledger shows how the cost-plus contract worked. The government promised to reimburse the manufacturer for every dollar spent on labor and materials, then added a guaranteed profit percentage on top of those costs. If the war ended and the contract was canceled, the company still recovered its expenses and its profit. Producing weapons became a zero-risk enterprise. Major corporations abandoned cars and appliances to manufacture tanks and planes, earning a fixed profit for every unit that left the factory. The sheer scale of this industrial output transformed the country. Inside these massive plants, workers were completing a heavy B-24 bomber every single hour. This mobilization culminated in the Manhattan Project, a $2 billion effort to develop the atomic bomb. Its deployment over Japan forced an immediate surrender, bringing the war to an end. The industrial effort that won the war tied the American economy to a permanent cycle of military manufacturing. By 1945, defense production accounted for 40% of the total U.S. GDP. 13% of the entire population relied on military contracts for their income. Removing that sector threatened to collapse the entire national economy. Politicians faced a dangerous trap. Cutting defense spending meant closing factories and eliminating millions of jobs, an outcome that would lead to certain electoral defeat and economic ruin. To keep the assembly lines moving, the system required a new enemy. The focus shifted immediately to an ideological battle against the Soviet Union, creating a permanent sense of global threat that justified continued military spending. Peace was now an economic liability. To maintain prosperity at home, the nation had to stay in a state of constant preparation for conflict. This model continued through the Vietnam War. While the military dropped 4 million tons of bombs, defense contractors like Bell Helicopter recorded unprecedented profits supplying thousands of aircraft for the conflict. The system later focused on the Middle East. The U.S. supported Saddam Hussein in the 1980s as a strategic partner, only to spend billions of dollars decades later to overthrow his government and execute him. In Afghanistan, the military remained long after its initial objectives were met. Even after eliminating Osama bin Laden, the U.S. stayed for another decade, funneling $2 trillion into a nation-building project that eventually failed. In this system, victory or defeat is secondary. As long as the government continues to order weapons and equipment, the business model remains successful. President Dwight D. Eisenhower saw this coming. In his farewell address, he warned the public about the rise of a military-industrial complex, a permanent alliance between the military and arms manufacturers that could exert influence on the government. That complex operates as a closed loop. Defense corporations fund political campaigns. Those politicians approve higher military budgets, and the military then uses that money to buy equipment from the corporations that funded the politicians. This cycle is currently funding tens of billions of dollars in military aid for the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East, ensuring the assembly lines never stop moving. When war is an optimized industry, peace is a threat to the bottom line. And as long as this profit incentive exists, the world will likely face a succession of endless conflicts. What geopolitical event should we investigate next? Let us know in the comments below.